Welcome to episode 5 of our Ask Me Anything series. Today, we are focused on leading teams with the question, how much should I push junior staff to improve? A firm leader asks, since it is difficult and expensive to hire experienced engineers and designers, I've been hiring junior staff and working with them to increase their knowledge and thrust them into roles that may be above where their skills are now. How do you determine the amount to push them to get better, quicker, more skilled? I don't want to lose an employee, but I want to make sure they understand that they need to keep on improving. This is such a good question. And the fact that a firm leader is even asking this question leads me to understand that you are committed to growing your staff, which is the first step in helping make sure that they stay and that they also improve their skills. Now, the challenge when we approach this from I have to push this mindset is that to managers, to firm leaders, pushing always feels hard and stressful. So if you imagine pushing a boulder up a cliff, in this case, your boulder contains all of the staff within your team or within your firm, it feels hard. And when you push, what also happens is it doesn't just feel hard to you as a manager. It can cause your employees to feel overwhelmed, unmotivated, and micromanaged. And so when we are pushing, it creates this kind of natural resistance instead of genuine engagement. The harder you push, in some cases, the more they will resist, which isn't what you want, because what we want is for eventually all of our younger staff to be able to manage their own projects from start to finish with minimal interaction and eventually be able to teach all those skills to other people. And so the analogy I want to use here is driving on ice. So I live in Pennsylvania. We do get ice and snow in the winter. And one of the things that is super challenging for new drivers to learn is that the proper way to drive when you hit an ice patch, so when your car starts skidding, is counterintuitive. Your natural instinct, if you haven't practiced this, is to, if you start skidding that way, to yank the wheel and turn the other way. If you do that, all that does is send you into a tailspin. Now, if instead you steer into the skid, your car will eventually slow down, stop. You'll be able to control it. But this is one of those things that you have to actively catch yourself and practice so that when you get into that moment, you know what to do and you can react in the best way possible. Now, the team development parallel here is that rather than forcing it, trying to force it by overcorrecting with the wheel, in this case, your staff, we want to create conditions for growth instead. And we need to practice this. So I, as a manager, need to practice this. We need to encourage our staff to practice that. So that leads to the question of how do we actually create those growth conditions? Now, to understand this, I want to talk to you about the IKEA effect. So there was a study done of folks that put together IKEA furniture. So if you are not familiar with IKEA, you can go into the store, you can get furniture, but you have to assemble it yourself. So you come home with these big boxes. I have bookshelves, I have beds in my house with IKEA, and there's some directions. Sometimes they're good directions, sometimes not so good. But you put this together yourself. And what the study wanted to figure out was, okay, in theory, if we're only looking at outcomes, people would value that furniture just as much if they had someone come to their house, put it together for them, and put that furniture in their room, as they would if they put it together themselves. In a way, having someone else put it together for you seems like it would save you time. And so, they thought that that would be more valuable. It turns out that that wasn't the case. People valued the furniture more when they actually put it together. The process of doing that made them have buy-in that, oh, this is a great piece of furniture. And so this lends itself to how we manage and how we create these growth conditions, because the fundamental principle here is that co-creation works. Now, I want to be very clear on this. This does not just apply to managing. I have used this IKEA effect concept trying to get my teenagers to do something. I've used it in volunteer capacities when I'm working on committees or with groups. Co-creation, if you are trying to get a whole bunch of people to move in a direction, co-creation is what you need to do. So, specifically to managing staff, what this IKEA effect tells us is that people value what they build. These co-created goals, they drive buy-in. And as a result, that means everyone involved, including that person you're managing, has a higher motivation to succeed. And so the practical application of this is at work, we want to use regular one-on-ones. What is regular? I like weekly, and weekly seems to work the best for the clients I work with as well. You can have more frequent ones if you have like a major deadline or something like that coming up, but at least weekly. And so you want to use those conversations as well as career conversations to co-create goals. Now, how you do this is very much in your languaging. And so let me give you some examples of the strategic use of career and feedback conversations to encourage growth in your staff. So here are 4 things that you might say as a manager in some of these conversations. I have high expectations and I am committed to helping you grow. In what areas do you want to stretch yourself this week, month, or quarter? I believe in your growth potential. Talk to me about areas of growth you'd like to focus on. I have a stretch project for you, and I want you to own this project. And aside, telling them specifically you want them to own this project is really, really important. We'll talk about why in a moment. However, the piece of it is then they start to think more critically about what's going on. And while for many of us as managers, we think in our head, oh, well, they should know that, we need to be explicit about, hey, I need you to own this project, own this process. Okay, the rest of what you could say in this one is, I expect that you'll be able to complete this on time and with my support. You explain the project, and then you ask, what do you need from me to be successful in the time frame? So you can share the deadline, you can back out when do you want them to share a plan about how they're going to approach that and give that as the deadline. But we want to make sure this is a narrow enough time frame that it's not kind of out there and they're not quite sure, oh, I have all the time in the world. What we do with this question is we help them start to develop into project managers as well. And then the last example of a strategic use of career and feedback conversations of what you could say is, let's plan to debrief this task when you're done. Please plan to share what went well for you, what you would do differently next time, and what I can do to better support you on a similar task in the future. This one is super helpful if you are, for example, a junior staff did something, you reviewed it, and you had a whole bunch of markups, some of them positive, a lot of them constructive criticism. You can hand them those markups and say, okay, I'm going to give you a day or two to look at these, and then I want to sit down and have a conversation, and this is what I want you to share with me. What this does is it puts the onus on them to take the constructive criticism and figure out how to grow, as opposed to you sitting there and saying, oh, well, you did this wrong and you did this wrong and you did this wrong, which is not going to be effective for growing your people. So the mental model shift that managers and leaders need to make is to shift from fixing or rescuing someone to coaching them. Now, this is and will feel counterintuitive, just like the proper way to drive when you hit an ice skid. Why? Because we as STEM professionals have been trained to solve problems. We have been trained to bring me a problem, I want to fix it for you. And I would be the first person to raise my hand to say, this has absolutely been counterintuitive for me. And shifting over to the coaching mode works. And so how do you know if you're in fixer mode or if you're in coacher mode? Let me talk about how this may show up. So if you have a fixer mindset, you may be giving immediate answers. You may be fixing the problem for others. So someone comes with you to a question and you're like, oh, I will just take care of that. Don't worry about that. You think to yourself things like, it's faster to do this myself. They are just too inexperienced. You will take on other people's responsibilities. So if you are an over-responsible type person, oldest children, of which I am one, I am talking directly to you. If you have a pattern of being over-responsible, you may be stuck in this fixer mindset. It also creates what I call an enabling tendency. Essentially, you create unproductive dependencies of other people on you such that you feel like you are the bottleneck. In other words, everything has to go through you. People can't make decisions by themselves. And as you would suspect, when that happens, now we are in a situation where you are dealing with burnout, way too much work to do, and this, like I said, unproductive dependency that doesn't help your staff grow. Now, I want to contrast this with the coach mindset. If you are showing up as a coach, you are asking powerful questions. I just gave you a couple of examples of how that might show up in career conversations. You are guiding their thinking process. You are asking, what solutions do you see? What do you recommend? Let's talk through, why you're making those recommendations and get alignment on where we're going from here. We think to ourselves, okay, yes, they may be inexperienced and they can step up to the challenge with my support. A coach mindset supports their ownership and acts as an accountability partner. A coach mindset also allows you to enable critical thinking skill development. Now, no one is a fixer all the time or a coach all the time. I bet you can imagine times when you have used both. So the trick is to catch yourself when you get into the fixer mindset and shift over to the coach approach. Now, your words, more than anything else, reveal how you are approaching this. So let's say an employee comes to you and they say, I am struggling with this deadline. A fixer approach, your response might be something like, oh no, that's critical. We've got to keep this client happy. So here's exactly what you need to do. And then you think about it and you're like, oh no, actually, I will just take care of that myself. And then you pause another moment and then you start to get frustrated and you say to them in an angry tone, why did you wait until the week of the deadline to tell me you're struggling? Now, when you do that, the result is you now have an employee who, number one, is going to be reluctant to share future issues because you just blame them at the end here with the angry tone for their struggles. You have created a situation where they learn that if they're struggling, they can just hand that to you and they don't need to worry about it, which doesn't teach them to persist. It doesn't teach them to think critically about how to solve the problem. And then for you personally, if you do this every time someone comes to you with a problem, you're going to be overloaded. This can lead directly to burnout if your habit is saying, oh, here's exactly what you need to do step by step. And oh, well, if we're in a deadline pressure situation, I'm just going to handle that myself. I want to contrast this with the coach approach to the same exact situation. So what you might say here is, this is important and the deadline isn't moving. And that's assuming this is true, that the deadline can't move. Tell me more about where you are struggling and what possible solutions you are considering. And what's your plan to get this done before the deadline? What help do you need to get there? So notice it's a completely different approach. Like the fixer approach feels like you are micromanaging. It feels like you're limiting your staff's growth. Whereas with the coach approach, you are encouraging them to think more expansively about the problem and what is their role in solving it. Now, what do you do if you are in a situation where you're recognizing as you're watching this, oh, I've trained my people that I will fix all the problems. Okay. What do you do if you're in that situation? And so I want to give you a script, and this is a script that I have shared with nearly all of my manager coaching clients, and they have been pleasantly surprised and in some cases shocked at how quickly the younger staff that they thought were not doing great on critical thinking shifted their mindset and started to own projects. So we're not talking, an hour, but we are talking a week or two, training them to do things in this way. The script I'm about to share with you has made a big difference and encouraged people to start owning their projects. Okay, so what you're going to do is you are going to set the expectation to help them own their growth by standardizing critical thinking. And so here is what you are going to say. And do this in a one-on-one conversation, maybe in that next one-on-one that you have with them. Okay, so you can say, the next time you come to me with a challenge, I want you to bring not just the question, but 2 possible solutions that you have considered, the pros and cons for each option, and your recommendation based on this information on how to proceed. And then you share. We'll discuss the challenge together, and I'll guide you in making the final decision, and I expect you to own the final outcome with my support. Your growth is important to me, and part of that is developing your strategic thinking and decision-making skills. And so I want to try this new process because I really think it will help you. Now, have this conversation, and then you're going to have to remember that you had this conversation, because the next time they come to you with a question, one of the things you're going to want to do is fall into that pattern of, oh, I would just give you the answer. Don't do that. When they come to you with a question, say, great, really good question. Talk to me about some solutions you've considered and pros and cons. Let's talk through those. And so you can just turn this script into more questions and ask them. Ask them what their recommendation is to proceed. Now, in case you are thinking, oh, why does this whole coaching thing matter? I want to take you to another study. So this one is from 1964. Robert Rosenthal, a Harvard business professor, did this study in 1964 on an elementary school south of San Francisco. In it, he gave all the children a test, and he told the teachers it was an IQ test that had the ability to predict which kids were about to experience huge growth in their IQ. He gave them this test, and then he told the teachers which specific children he expected to see dramatic growth based on this test. He followed the students for 2 years after this, and then he reviewed which students had performed the best, which had shown the highest levels of growth. And what he found was that the students with the dramatic growth were indeed the same ones that he told the teachers about. Now, the catch with this was that, yes, he had given the students a test, but there was actually no difference in the students' performance on the test, and Rosenthal had picked random names from the test takers to tell the teachers that those kids had high potential. Now, what happened, and what he surmises happened here, is that the random kids that he told the teachers had high potential, the teachers' expectations of the kids were different. And because Rosenthal had told them this, that expectation in internalizing by the teachers of that expectation affected the teachers' moment-to-moment interactions with the kids in 1,000 almost invisible ways. So as one thing he observed is that teachers who think their students, specific students, were more high potential would give them more time to ask and answer questions. They would give them more specific feedback. They were more likely to appreciate them and give them approval that would build their confidence and motivation over time. Now, this study has tremendous implications for managers, because what it tells us is that your expectations of your staff, those dictate the many small day-to-day interactions you have with them. And together, that largely dictates your staff's ability to be successful and grow. Now, this is not the only study that backs up this concept of the critical importance of manager expectations in staff growth. So in his 2019 book, The Talent Code, which I think should be required reading for all managers, Daniel Coyle tells us that greatness isn't born, it is grown. And he presents study after study, many of them in the sports world, which is a place where most of us like to think that people are either born with sports talent or they are not. He debunks that myth. He shares story after story and study after study where average and even disadvantaged children growing up in third world countries became extraordinary in their fields through a combination of practice, letting those skills become your identity, which he refers to as ignition in that book, and master coaching. So, in this context, a coach is defined as someone who helps others achieve mastery through a process of explaining, demonstrating, giving feedback, correcting mistakes, and encouraging practice until it's done correctly. Now, that definition hopefully sounds familiar because that is exactly what you should be doing if you are a STEM manager or leader. And Daniel Coyle in this book makes the evidence-based case that someone cannot gain mastery in any field without coaching. So that means in the case of STEM organizations, your job as a manager, your job as a firm leader is to either yourself personally act as that master coach or make sure there's someone interacting with younger staff in that function. These findings are the same. They tell us performance expectations of a manager and their ability to act as a coach is a critical factor in staff success. And so let me make all this practical for you. Let's take this all together. And so that means, like, if we had to have a formula for how do we grow our people, it looks like this. We have a motivated individual. I'll come back to that in a moment. We add to it challenging and co-created goals, the IKEA effect I talked about a moment ago. And then we add to that high support. Now, let's unpack what these are, starting with high support, because we haven't talked about that one yet. And so high support looks like providing learning resources, encouraging ownership of activities, helping staff develop their critical thinking and decision-making skills, and creating a psychologically safe learning environment. And that means we don't do the example of the fixer I shared a little bit ago, where we jump into frustration and start blaming our staff for screwing things up, which is inevitable when you are learning. What we do instead is we create an environment where we are approachable and we tell them, I'm looking at, if you make a mistake, it's a learning opportunity. That also means that we do things like if they're doing something new, we don't jump that on them the week before a deadline when there's no time to learn and grow. We help them plan their work accordingly so that if something gets messed up, they have time to learn and fix it. There's a whole much more I could go into on the psychological safety side. Like we actually have full workshops on that. But for the purposes of today and this question around how do I know how much to push junior staff, a key piece of this is if for whatever reason they don't feel like they are safe to learn and make mistakes and grow from them when they interact with you, none of the other things I have shared today are going to work well because the tendency is going to be to hide mistakes. And as soon as you start spending energy hiding mistakes because you don't want to get yelled at or criticized, you are not in a space where you can grow quickly. Yes, you can grow, but if your goal is to grow your people quickly, you've got to create a psychologically safe space where people are like, okay, I have a problem. Let's work through the problem. Let's go, rather than spending hours and hours trying to either figure it out so they don't look bad or covering up the problem so that they don't get in trouble. Okay, so I already talked about challenging and co-created goals being a key piece for staff growth. And the question you may be in your mind, what is a challenging goal? A challenging goal is a goal that's one level above their current capabilities. And so you can think of this like stacking tasks. in that, okay, let's say you're going to design this piece of a project the first time you do it, like here's the piece, kind of document for yourself the process, how you think about it, all of that. The next time you do it, okay, you're not going to need as much, we'll say, hand holding on that. So let me give you this piece and the next piece to take on. And so you just stack the next thing on top of something they've already did. Okay, so finally, let's get to motivated individuals. Now, the science of motivation is somewhat complex, but what I would say is if you are working with STEM professionals, they were somehow motivated to work their way through engineering school. That is not a small amount of motivation. So I'm starting with the premise that you have everyone on your team is a motivated individual, as long as they have a catalyst to that motivation. So like if we're talking about what do we do in organizations that demotivate people all the time? Well, we give them this challenge that's not one level above, but like 6 levels above where they're currently at. We don't give them the resources to succeed. Their manager is traveling all the time, so they don't even know who to ask. That is a very fast way to demotivate even a very, very highly motivated individual. Similarly, that psychological safety thing I was just talking about, if someone goes to their manager and every single time they have a conversation with them, it's only ever a conversation about what they did wrong. Again, even the most intrinsically motivated person is going to quickly become demotivated and not have a lot of confidence, which is the absolute opposite of what we need to build and do if we want to quickly grow junior staff. So the fundamental piece of this is that we motivate other people when they know that we believe they are capable of growth. And this is a sentence I encourage you to grab and share verbatim in as many conversations as you can with your junior staff. You can say things like, okay, I know this is a challenge and I believe you are capable of stepping up to it. I believe you are capable of growing with my help if we give you the right resources. Like my commitment to you is to help you grow. I can point to so many times in my own career journey where someone saying that at the right time, I don't think it's an exaggeration to say changed my career trajectory. It took it from, oh, I'm frustrated, I'm never going to be able to figure this out, to, oh, okay, they believe in me, and so I'm going to make sure I step up to their expectations. And so telling your staff this can really, really help with the motivation piece of it. And it once again goes back to the mindset here that if we truly believe they are capable of growth, we are not trying to fix them. We are coming at everything we're doing with them with, yes, we have deadlines, we have projects, we have things we have to get out the door. But when I'm giving you feedback, for example, I'm coming at it from the mindset of how is the feedback I'm about to give you going to help you grow? So taking this all together, instead of pushing, what we want to do is create conditions for growth. And that means creating challenging, co-created goals. So having the conversation with them so there is buy-in on that challenge, giving them high support, and motivating them from the mindset of, I believe that you are capable of growth. So to recap, this was the question that we were answering today. How do you determine the amount to push your junior staff to get better, quicker, more skilled? In our next AMA videos, we will start talking about conflict management. And we actually have 2 questions on this, so I'll be taking this one in the next AMA video and the second one in the video after that. Now, if you've missed any of the videos in this AMA series, the first 4 episodes were based on a single question from a STEM woman about advancing to the C-suite. So if you are interested in advancing yourself, go check out episode 1, 2, 3, and 4. I will link episode 1 in the description of this video. If you click on that, all the other ones are linked there. Today, we talked about pushing junior staff. And again, next time we are talking about conflict management. So if you are dealing with some conflicts at work, you will not want to miss that.